But I'll not only release it, I'll probably have a press conference and read it to you word by word so that the press covers it accurately. Because it's a very important document, and unlike Obama, who could have destroyed the Middle East with a horrible JCPOA, it is the worst agreement. That was a road to a nuclear weapon. Mine is a wall against a nuclear weapon. I mean, I see these people say, but we already had one. That was the worst. He paid a fortune for it. We paid nothing.
President Trump speaking from France at the G7 summit and talking about the deal that had been put into place during the Obama administration. A lot of folks on the left right now are saying that what they have worked to get right now is no better than where we started, that they continue to, as I mentioned yesterday, the current vocabulary to key in on, the talking point from the left is a war of choice. That's what they're calling the Iran denuclearization efforts by President Trump. And a lot of folks are saying that JCPOA was a much better deal. Let's get to Victor Davis Hanson, who is a senior fellow at Classics Military History, the Hoover Institution, as well as author of a book upcoming here, The Counter-Revolution, The Fall and Rise of Donald Trump and the MAGA Movement. Victor Davis Hanson, thank you for being with us here today. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I want to give you the opportunity to weigh in, I guess, on the deal, but I would note that we don't know exactly what the deal is, although a lot of folks on the left are already saying it's a terrible deal.
Yeah, whatever the deal is, the key to it is, are we willing to enforce it? And by that I mean act in a disproportionate, not use this word proportionate. And that is, if they violate elements of the deal, are we willing to go back and do what we have done for years in Serbia or other places, disproportionate use of force? So if they decide that they're going to give up enrichment and they delay, if they say they're going to turn over the missile arsenal and they shoot a missile at Kuwait, then we need to hit bridges, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know to what degree the administration has faced that fact, but there's no history that these people that run this theocracy, if that's who we're dealing with, have any credibility whatsoever. I think they're playing a little bit of bad cop, good cop, that there's a moderate veneer that poses that they're reasonable and they're negotiating, but they either are not autonomous or they are in league with the theocrats and the Revolutionary Guard.
We're speaking with Victor Davis Hanson here on the Annie Frey Show. A lot of people referring to the Strait of Hormuz being reopened after this deal, and they say the Strait of Hormuz was open before the war. Is there anything different about an open strait now compared to before this war began?
Yeah, that's kind of a ridiculous argument. The strait had been, during the Reagan period when we flagged tankers, it had been closed for a while. The only reason it was open is that nobody, that is the prior 7 presidents, nobody had dared to use force to make them either weaker or to neuter their military or to force them to concede. And so once you do that, anybody who did that, they would reply and try to close the strait. So the other thing that's very disingenuous about people comparing the two accords, Obama had no intention, and they knew that, of ever enforcing it with, bombing or rocketry, anything. And if you look at Iran now, while they do have some remnant or vestigial capability, 90% of their military efficacy is destroyed, and their economy is being strangled as we speak. That didn't happen with Obama. He was negotiating from a stance that no matter what you do, it's against my ideology or my foreign policy, I will not hit you, I will not strike you. He had a different idea. That the subtext of that first agreement was, I'm going to create and empower a Shiite crescent with Tehran, Damascus, Beirut, Gaza, and this is going to be a foil or a balance to the Gulf moderates and to Israel, as if there was no moral difference between the two, and then I'm going to come in and adjudicate every once in a while. That was his plan, to empower the Shiite minority, almost as if he was a community organizer in foreign policy clothes.
I think that it's so surface level, it's so shallow to look at a lot of the reactions, maybe on the left and the right, about the actual deal. Of course, many people who are in the media who are talking about the deal that they haven't quite read yet from President Trump, or the memorandum of understanding, that they if they hate Trump, they already know that they hate the deal, and that's that, and they don't really need to go too deep in order to prove their point to those that will lap up the opportunity today to hate Donald Trump for yet another thing. But there's no doubt that President Trump's action and his willpower to go in and denuclearize Iran, that at least the table is set differently today than it has been for decades leading up to this moment. Do you believe that the denuclearization of Iran, the effort here to keep Donald Trump, or for Donald Trump to keep Iran from achieving that nuclear status, was the worthy goal of this administration the entire time? And do you believe they've achieved it?
Yeah, they achieved it if they will enforce whatever the accord is. That's the whole key. But if they allow, if 2 weeks from now we see a couple of missiles launched against Kuwait, or a sneaky mosquito boat laying mines, and we say, well, that's minor, then it's all over. You can't do that. Every time they try to break it, you have to be disproportionate, so they get it in their head that they lost. Mm-hmm. And I think it is disingenuous, because there is no ability right now. There's no cyclotron. They have destroyed the nuclear, military, industrial complex for the most part of Iran. That wasn't true in the past. And more importantly, they have shown that the American military is willing and able at a moment's notice to go in and inflict damage that no one conceived. I think we're forgetting that they terrorized the Middle East for 50 years. They were 93 million people. They advertised they were crazy. They blew up embassies. They blew up barracks. They assassinated people. They were running Iraq. And everybody said, you might go into Afghanistan, you might go into Syria, but do not touch Iran. They're crazy. And one of the things that we forget, we blew up that whole image of invulnerability and have disgraced them. The other thing very quickly is, under Obama, when he came into office, there was a green revolution. There was 1 million people in the street, and he completely ignored it and empowered that regime. But, if you humiliate that regime and the people look when this deal is going on, and if they get their money from relief sanctions, what are they going to do? Are they going to try to rebuild a half-century, $500 billion complex to replace their arsenal? Are they going to give money to Hezbollah or Hamas? That's not going to go down well with people who are waiting, 5-mile-long gas lines, we hear in some cases. So they're going to have a problem with their internal dissension. And when the Berlin Wall fell, everybody said, well, there was an immediate change. There wasn't. It took months for Eastern European countries to digest that and then throw off the yoke of communism. It took the Russian people 2 years. So we have lit a spark, and we don't know how long that fuse is, but it's going to have repercussions if that theocracy tries to rebuild everything at the expense of people who are really suffering right now. I don't think. Another thing is, we don't have ground troops there, so we have no embedded reporters. There's absolutely no news that comes out of Iran unless it's censored by favored left-wing organs like CNN, or it's the state media itself. And we know they're not telling it to. So it could be much worse than I think it is than they're letting on.
Victor Davis Hanson speaking with us, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. Has President Trump's efforts here, has the administration, in conjunction with Israel, from the jump of the efforts that they've made to denuclearize Iran and to take out their military infrastructure, have they long-term recalibrated the Middle East? Do you feel as though, if we don't, as you mentioned, everything matters on how we maintain and lock down whatever deal we have. We have to stick with it. Do you feel as though the Middle East could very quickly snap back to all the operations that we've engaged in there and go back to old habits, or do you think it's permanently reconfigured?
You're right. It depends. I mean, if we don't enforce this and we just go home and say, well, we have to worry about the midterms or the price of gas, then they're going to say they won and we couldn't stop them. But if we persist and enforce them, there is a momentum going that it's going to be very hard to stop. I mean, whoever thought that the Israelis would be in the UAE and other Gulf countries protecting them from a fellow Muslim country like Iran, which they were doing with missile defense. Israel had 300 fighter planes, but the UAE and the Gulf Council, the Six Nations, have 600. And we heard that a lot of them have been flying. They don't like to talk about it. So you basically have an Israeli Air Force and a UAE, Kuwait, all of them flying against the same target. That seems Orwellian given the history of the Middle East. And then when you look at Russia, they have lost their Syrian proxy. It looks like they've lost their Iranian proxy. China will not be getting cheap oil from Iran. It won't be getting it from Venezuela. And when they were bragging about how sophisticated Chinese air defenses were, we heard that for years. You can't go in Iran. They were violated and rendered inert in 2 days by the Israelis and the Americans. The China didn't come off very well. And now they're importing 11 million barrels of oil a day, and they are at the mercy of the world oil market exporters, of which we're one of the largest. We're now the largest producer of oil and gas in the history of civilization. So everything has changed across the board as far as energy goes. And you look at the Western Hemisphere, Panama is not ceding the exits and entry to the canal to the Chinese. The Chinese and Russians are out of Venezuela. We are governing the output and the payment for the Venezuelan people. There's a lot of things that have happened that the left just sort of brushes off and doesn't talk about.
Yeah.
But the world is very different, and they keep saying that the big losers of this so far, China and Russia. I know people don't believe that, but Russia's bogged down. They've lost 1 million people, probably another 700,000 wounded or missing, and they're losing the war finally. And Europe looks completely inert. When you look at, they say things, they don't have a military, they have open borders, they have 15% of their population in some nations that are very dangerous. They're antithetical to their own governments. Their green energy has ruined the German economy. It's ruined the British economy. So it's all relative, but we are in a very good position if everybody will just calm down. And if we can get this deal and we abide by it, and abide by it in the sense that we force them to comply, then I think it'll be wonderful. But it's very tricky. If we sign this deal and tomorrow you're on your radio show and you hear that they took out the desalinization plant of Saudi and Donald Trump says it was a love tap or something like that, we're in big trouble.
A minor incursion.
Yes.
We're speaking with Victor Davis Hanson here on the Annie Frey Show. I do note, I mentioned at the beginning, I've seen a lot of people from the left who are trying to criticize what they haven't fully read yet. And of course, you're talking about follow through as well. But Victor, there are definitely folks on the right side of the aisle who are criticizing the president and this administration's efforts here as well. What do you say to the division that exists on the right?
Well, so far, I mean, if you look at the polls, they've gone down a little bit, but they're in the realm of 75 to 85% of people who identify as Republicans support the president. It is true that the apostate right, I would say that Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and the people around them in various gradations, they're very influential on social media and they have large audiences, but I don't think they've translated that into political opposition. When you look at the Congress, you see a Massey or a Marjorie Taylor Greene, but they're becoming, isolated, dysfunctional figures. You don't see a big Congress of people. Maybe stealthily they're going to the president and saying, you know what, we're going to lose our purple district. And I'm sure that's happening, but you don't really see it yet. The big danger, though, is he's got a lot of support from people who feel in the Republican Party they took risk. And if he does not enforce that, that's where the worry is going to come from the mainstream Republicans that said, you know what, nobody likes going in the Middle East. And, we don't believe this is a forever endless war. We have no ground troops. We get that. We only were there for 40 days of kinetic. But I took a risk and you better follow through. And I think that's the danger. And it's not from the other people. They're peripheral.
Yeah. I think that this president did the right thing, which was the hard thing. And it would have been easy for him going into midterms to, push some of the economic success that he's had, to not, flirt with the idea of, okay, maybe even so, as I've mentioned before, that it might be the patriotic thing to just put the $4+ gas in your car to understand the efforts that are requiring. We've been, under the guise of climate change, asked to pay higher energy prices over and over and over again with very little reward in hand. But did this president decide to do the hard thing that prior administrations were unwilling to do in the face of it being maybe politically challenging for him?
Absolutely. And it's not, the midterms aren't over yet. And I mean, if you look back for the last 40 presidencies, 95% of them lost the midterm election. Lost in the sense that they suffered a negative loss, not necessarily they lost a House, but a negative loss of House or Senate or both. But there's still 4.5 months to go. And if he can get a deal and he can enforce it and he can point to Venezuela and he can point to Panama Canal and he can point to things that were safer. I don't remember what was in the news 4.5 months ago, to tell you the truth. And then if he could, there's a lot, people forget there's a lot of speculation going on, and people have bought high-priced oil futures. And if that strait's open, you've got 250 super tankers with 1 million, 2 million barrels of oil, and they're going to want to unload it. And we are at record production. Venezuela's gone up 300,000. Russia is being allowed to sell it. And you get the impression that oil and therefore gas might be a lot cheaper than it is today by November. And then finally, we don't know the effect of the redistricting wars, but it does seem that the Republican legislatures are in the majority, and they have been underrepresented, and the left has been overrepresented. And they could pick up 4 or 5 seats there, and we don't know the effect of the Supreme Court on racial gerrymandering. So there's maybe 4, 8, 7, 9 seats. We don't know. I think they're going to hold the Senate. So it's not all over. And I think that's pretty clear. Everybody said, well, he's lost the midterms. He hasn't lost the midterm. History says he has, but you never know with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Victor Davis Hanson, a true pleasure to have you on the show with us. Thank you for giving us some of your afternoon. We're grateful for it.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Talk to you again soon, we hope. Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and just incredibly well-researched and spoken on these deep issues. His book is coming up, The Counter-Revolution, The Fall and Rise of Donald Trump and the MAGA Movement, on X at VD Hanson. Go check him out there. We'll